Hello YouTube, my name is Elise. I'm coming at you guys with another video. And this time it's going to be an interview with the military officer and really giving you guys the inside scoop of what it's like to be in the military. So today we are joined by a military officer himself, Boo Bear, and he's going to be giving us a little scoop of what it's really like being in the military. And I'm gonna ask him some questions, and you guys could get like a feel for it. So what is your rank? How long have you been in the military? And tell me a little bit about your military journey.
All right, so I'm currently an O2 in the military. I'm currently an O2, which is a first lieutenant. I joined the military about 6 years ago. Well, 5.5 years ago. I've been working on my 6th year right now. Back in 2015, I enlisted as a 6-day whiskey combat medic. And I did that for about 2 years before I went to OCS and got a commission. I've been an officer since July of 2018. I've been promoted one time since I got my commission.
So what made you want to make that change from being enlisted into an officer? And what kind of officer are you? Like, what position did you take as officer?
All right, so what made me want to make the change is I actually joined the military with my degree. So when I first started trying to join the military, I really wanted to go in as an 09 Sierra, which is an officer candidate. But I was running into some medical issues with joining, because back when I was in high school, before I went to college, I tried to join the military and I got disqualified for possible diabetes. And when I tried to join after college, I didn't realize that that same thing was going to come back up, and it got a little crazy because I had to keep going to the hospital, the doctor, for all these different tests. I go get labs that they tell me to go get, and then when I got back, they were like, actually need more labs, you need different labs, you need these specific type of labs. So by the time I got done with cleared, like I could not wait any longer, and I just went ahead and enlisted, and I picked up enlisted MOS. So really that's what really sparked me to want to change to be an officer, because I never intended on enlisting in the first place. But I had a good time. I had a good time being enlisted. I actually enjoyed being a medic, even though it really wasn't my passion. I did enjoy it. But once the opportunity came to go to OCS, I just went ahead and took it, and here I am.
And what's your job in the as an officer now?
So as an officer now, I am a transportation officer, and it's basically a part of the logistics branch. But the logistics branch branches into 3 separate branches, which is transportation officer, quartermaster, and ordnance. Once those lieutenants become captain, they go to what's called captain career course, and they all become logistics officers. So right now, that's a long answer to say that I am a transportation officer.
And then from him going from a medic to transportation officer, like, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, they don't relate.
Yeah, they don't relate at all. I remember you came back, you said transportation officer, and I was like, ugh. I was like, you couldn't find nothing better than a transportation officer.
So when I went there,
it doesn't sound good.
So when I went there, I went to become a medical service officer.
Yeah.
So medical service corps is a little bit different from the medical field in the Army. The medical field is going to be your doctors, your dentists, and different things like that. But medical service corps is a whole nother branch, because it's all the admin stuff that you'll find at a hospital. Basically, within the medical service corps, there are little micro branches within it, and logistics was one of them, and that's the career path that I wanted to do, because that was one of my mentors, one of the guys, the captains at the hospital that really believed in me. That's what he did, and he made it seem really, really cool. So if I couldn't do medical logistics, then I went ahead and did regular overall logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember he came back transportation officer, and I was just like, that was so random.
It was pretty random.
And it was out of the blue. And I remember one lady was for sure that she was going to become infantry. And I think that's just because a large amount of people do become infantry out of OCS.
Yeah.
But turns out a lot of people volunteered to become infantry. So you're not actually, so he actually wasn't forced into being infantry.
Correct.
Because a lot of people actually wanted to be infantry.
Yeah, so in my OCS class, and I can't speak for all OCS classes, but the top like 30, 40 candidates, really, we have maybe like 25 we have maybe like 25 infantry slots, and the top like 40 people took them all up. I mean, it was crazy. I think only one person got force branch infantry, and he was like at the bottom of the list. So you can just, like, yeah, he was probably like number like 200 out of 200.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of infantryman he was gonna become, but hopefully it worked out for him.
So I know you went to OCS, but what other trainings have you done, and how many PCSs have you done?
So basically I've probably been in training just as much time as I've been on station, right? So or more, right? So start with basic training at Fort Jackson. That was 10 weeks. And then I went to AIT at Fort Sam Houston. That was 16 weeks. After basic training in AIT school, I ended up getting stationed at the Pentagon. And at the Pentagon, I went to BLC. Then after that, I went to OCS, which is at Fort Benning. That was 12 weeks. Then after I graduated and got my commission at Fort Benning, I went to Fort Lee for BOLIC. That was 16 weeks. And then from there, I got stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. So Fort Leonard Wood, man, it was so trash. But there we spent maybe like, I don't know, 12 months there. And then I ended up calling my branch and asking him for something else. He said he only had airborne slots. So, I could have spent my whole military career never jumping out of a plane, and I would have never volunteered to do it. But I found out that there was something that I would rather do outside of jumping out of planes, and that was getting out of Fort Leonard Wood. So I weighed my options there, and I ended up coming here to Fort Bragg, and I went to airborne school. That was 3 weeks, and here I am.
He'll go to another training in like a year?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Yeah, like a year and a half. Whenever it comes up, and he has to go. So what is the current position that you are now?
So the current position that I am now is I'm a part of Alpha Company, the BSB, which is a distribution company. And I am in charge of 3rd Platoon, which is a distribution platoon.
This position is very time consuming.
Yeah.
We better be at work all day long.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is the typical day like for you?
So a typical day for me is going to be, I wake up, I do PT, then I come home, then I go back to work around like 9:30. I am mostly concerned with planning, training, doing administrative duties for my platoon, and going to meetings, like just meetings on top of meetings. And all this meeting is just purely planning. And basically around like 1700, I'm trying to close out a bunch of stuff. But for some reason, in this unit, like, people want to have meetings at the end of the day, which meetings spark more movement, and then movement takes more time. So like around like 1730 to 1800, I'm still at work trying to get off. So typical day for me is just mostly just PT, meetings, administrative duties, different things like that.
So now that you've done the enlisted side of things and you've done the officer, now you're doing the officer side of things.
Yeah.
What is the biggest difference between being an enlisted and an officer? And would you suggest being an officer over being enlisted? Which one would you like better?
All right, so for me, the biggest difference between an officer and an enlisted, well, let's say an NCO, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a non-commissioned officer. Officers are more concerned with the planning, right? making sure everything is resourced, making sure timelines are complete, make sure that all of our documentation is in effect or whatever. Whereas the non-commissioned officer is more concerned with the execution of those tasks. So, for example, I planned a shooting range for some of my soldiers for 240 Bravo, which is machine gun. And I did all of the planning. I got the range, I got the land, I got the ammo, I got the weapon systems, the vehicles, everything that we needed to run this training. But once the training began, an NCO took over it, and they made sure that every soldier was trained to standard. I basically didn't have to do any of that, because on top of resourcing all of that stuff, I resourced the personnel as well, which was my NCOs. If you really enjoy the execution of those tasks, NCO is for you. So for me, like I'm a transportation officer. If you really enjoy driving vehicles, if you really enjoy leading those convoys, like, okay, like you're gonna be an NCO. If you really enjoy like one-on-one time with soldiers and training soldiers and different things like that, NCO is for you. If you really enjoy like the behind the scenes piece of that, like the administrative stuff, the policy, making policies, if you really enjoy like really making a difference on a wider scale earlier in your career, I would say become an officer. And that was my biggest reason to become an officer, because I wanted to have a larger impact earlier in my career.
Mm-hmm. And so, what's crazy is about Bieber being a transportation officer is that he doesn't actually drive the vehicles.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to drive the vehicles.
Nope.
And, transportation officer just means that he's the person who can plan who's going to drive the vehicles and what's going to be in the vehicles, yeah, and how and where to get the vehicles from.
Yeah.
So he's actually just the planner of it, but being a transportation officer, he actually doesn't drive anything. Like, explain the difference in the rank structure between an officer and being enlisted.
So I actually get this question a lot, like, and people don't realize this, right? So there are three.
You do?
Huh? Yeah. Oh. So I got this question a lot, like when I was at AIT XO.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that the rank structures are totally different. They don't cross. So it's three different rank structures. You have enlisted, you have warrant officer, and you have officer. Now you can go from being enlisted to a warrant officer, or enlisted to an officer, warrant officer to officer, even officer to enlisted. But you don't get promoted. You only get promoted within those three separate structures. So if I'm enlisted, I will never get promoted to be first lieutenant. I will never get promoted to that. The highest I can go is the E9. I can get appointed a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant if I go to a commissioning source such as OCS, ROTC, and or like West Point or anything like that. So really, you just have to just look at it like this. So enlisted goes from private to sergeant major. Warrant officers go from warrant officer to chief warrant officer 5. And then from and on the officer form, we go from second lieutenant to general.
Yeah. And then so you did talk a little bit about how the different ways to become an officer. So go a little bit into depth about that. What are the ways to become an officer?
So there's a few ways to become an officer, right? So you can go and these options are available to people that are currently in the Army or are trying to join the Army from civilian. Mm-hmm. So for example, for OCS, right? So let's start there. OCS is an officer candidacy school. It's taught at Fort Benning. It's 12-week course, and you can enlist to go to OCS. So you go to your recruiter and you say, I'm enlisting to go to OCS, and you get a 09 Sierra MOS. and that means you go to basic training as an enlisted soldier specialist, and then you go to OCS, and if you pass OCS, you become a second lieutenant, right? If you fail OCS, you just get a new MOS as a specialist. OCS can also be done in service, which is what I did. You enlist, you get a regular MOS, you go to your unit, and then you apply for OCS, and you go to OCS from your duty station. And you go there as at whatever rank you were when you got there. When you graduate, you become a second lieutenant and move on. If you don't graduate, you just go back to your unit, the same rank that you were, and the same MOS, back to the same duty station. So then the other way is to go to ROTC. So ROTC can be done, of course, when you first get to college. Start ROTC, you do your 4 years, and once you graduate, you get a commission, and then that's that, right? You don't have to go to OCS or anything like that. And then you can also do that in service by doing what's called Green to Gold. Green to Gold is like you do 2 years of college, you get your associate's degree, you apply for a 4-year university, you get out of active duty, and you go to become a full-time student in ROTC. Once you graduate, you get a commission with everybody else that was doing ROTC for the 4 years. The last way is you can go to one of the military academies. So that's going to be the West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy. I don't know what those other ones are called, but West Point is the Army one. Once you do your 4 years there, once you graduate, you get a commission just like ROTC people. All of these commissions.
But you forgot West Point goes to OCS?
No.
They don't? Oh,
no.
Okay.
So West Point, you graduate. Once you graduate West Point, you get a commission just like ROTC.
Okay, but you do go to BOLIC because
so that's what I'm about to say.
Job training.
So all of these commissioning sources all feed to BOLIC. Mm-hmm. Once you get your branch, and there are various ways to get your branch in each one of these commissioning sources. You can do more research on that. But once you get your branch, then you go to what's called Basic Officer Leaders Course. And everybody goes to that no matter what your commissioning source was. So in my class, I had ROTC people, I had Green to Gold people, I had in-service OCS, 09 Sierras, I had West Point. Everybody was there. And we all went to the same course. And we all get the same amount of money. Unless, of course, you've been enlisted for an extended period of time. Then you get what's called 01 E-Pay. But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. So, like, if you're enlisted and you've been enlisted for a certain amount of time, you'll get paid a little bit more than everybody else, but you still all start out at the same rank.
Yeah. Same status.
Yeah,
nobody
same
looks at
status.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that there is a difference when you say you're a West Point graduate.
Yeah.
It is
it kind of hit
like,
different.
Oh
hit a
my
little
gosh,
different, yeah.
It is a girl who lives in our cul-de-sac or whatever, and she's a West Point graduate, and like when you hear it, you're just like, oh shoot, you went to West Point? That's crazy. Because everybody knows, like in the Army, that's like a huge thing.
Yeah.
But it's a huge thing, but then once you get into the nitty-gritty of actually working, it really doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. So what is the biggest thing that you hear about officers? Like, what is your biggest stigma? I know a few things that I hear about officers, like, that, you know, like, kind of like everybody kind of says about you in the Army. Like, what's the biggest stigma?
The biggest stigma?
Like, what's, like, the biggest, like, thing that people say, like, about officers? I know I've heard a few.
Tell me
that
one.
That lieutenants are basically privates.
Yeah.
And that you guys don't know anything.
But that's true. That's not a stigma.
No, what I'm saying is the fact that you guys don't know anything, and that you try to come in there putting in these rules and you guys don't know what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's like one of the big things I've heard about officers. Is that they say like they don't have any real experience with anything.
Yeah, so I think that's true. Like, really, if I was to give a brand new officer, some advice, I would just say, you know, go in there with some humility or whatever, and just realize that you really don't know anything, right? Like, everybody that you're working with know more about everybody that you're working with know more about what you're telling them to do than you will, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not trained on that stuff, right? You're just kind of just trained generally of how to lead. That's it. So, really, you really don't know anything. You're really worse than a private because a private is not expected to lead, right? A private is expected to just do, whereas you're expected to lead, do, and know a lot more than you really do, right? And you feel kind of inadequate when you don't know. So a lot of people try to fake the funk, and and it makes it worse, right? So it's just better just to just realize that you don't know anything and just really take advice from everybody who do know things about that. One thing that I have said that people have said about NCOs was about officers is like can't spell lost without LT because LTs are like so like lost in the sauce or whatever. And it's kind of true, right? So like, because you're expected to know a lot about everything, and you really don't know anything about anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you're really learning on the fly. So really like a lot of the stigmas that people say about lieutenants is real. It's true, right? Like, even captains, or you realize a captain only been in the army for about 4 years.
Yeah.
So they really don't know a brand new captain really don't know as much as, a lot of the enlisted people that they're expected to lead. Mm-hmm. But they know a lot about being an officer and a lot about administrative stuff and leading soldiers. So you really, you really gotta like take those two things into effect when you're trying to like talk about like the stigmas of officers, because it's mostly true, but
yeah, there's also some untrue ones that they're nerdy.
Some of them are pretty nerdy. Some of them I'm kind of nerdy, you know what I mean? Like,
but I'm talking about like Steve Urkel type stuff. Yeah. I don't think you're even close to that.
Yeah. Some of them are pretty nerdy though.
That they're nerdy, that they're all straight laced type of people. That they're all, what else? There's so many things people say about officers. And I think it's just because it's not that many, it doesn't seem like there's that many people who are officers. So it's kind of one of those worlds where it's like, like this person obviously thinks they're better than us. You know,
but you gotta think about it. You gotta think about it. Like, so like they say like, and I'm not trying to say this to be like entitled or anything like that, right? Where it's kind of lonely at the top, right? So like when like I'm at like so in my platoon, right? I'm the only officer in my platoon. You know what I mean? So really everybody's looking up to you, and you're just like, you want to be a part of their groups, but like you can't because you're not supposed to really be a part of their groups, right? Because you're charged with leading them, right? So really you're stuck with 3 other lieutenants or 4 other lieutenants in your company that you really like can talk to, and what if you don't really like them? You know what I mean? So then you're really like, or really don't have enough interest with them. So you're really kind of just limited to that, right? And then you kind of spend your whole career kind of being like that, and that's why you see a lot of NCOs are super like sociable, and they're really cool. You know what I mean? And like a lot of officers are like awkward about different things, like social interactions and stuff like that, because they're really not quite used to interacting with a bunch of people all the time. They're really kind of just used to just everybody, kind of interacting with you when it's necessary. You know what I mean? That type of thing.
Yeah, I've met a lot of awkward like lieutenant colonels.
Yeah, they're all awkward.
They're very awkward.
Yeah.
They're nice. I wouldn't say they're like bad people. They're just very it's just an awkward conversation.
Yeah.
Versus enlisted, where they're more conversational because they've had to be that way.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to be social because there's a lot of people that you're interacting with
all the time.
So that brings us to the end of our video. I hope you guys got some good advice out of it, and please like, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you guys thought of the video. And thank you guys for watching.